Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's session in the XR Design Speaker Series hosted by the UCLA XR Initiative's Design Subcommittee. Today, we're excited to welcome Dr. Jacki Morie. He is a pioneer in virtual reality.
I'll let people in while you introduce
Okay,
me.
great. And immersive media, known for creating transformative experiences that blend art, science, and storytelling. As a founding researcher at the USC Institute for Creative Technologies, she developed groundbreaking VR techniques and patented a scent delivery device to deepen immersion. Through her company, All These Worlds, she has designed virtual environments to support healing, mindfulness, and long duration space missions. She currently teaches a couple of wonderful immersive experience design courses at UCLA Extension, one of which I'm currently taking. And today she will share key design considerations for creating meaningful VR projects, drawing from her decades of experience at the forefront of VR research and development. So I will hand it over to Jacki. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
You, thank you for that introduction. I'm making sure that I'm doing the sharing right. Okay, that looks right. Share. We will share this screen. All right, everybody. Okay, so that should be pretty visible to everybody. Yes? Great.
Yeah.
So I've loosely titled this Design Considerations for Immersive VR Projects, and it does include some of the stuff I teach in the class and some other thoughts along the way. I'd like to start out by saying that VR is a very unique medium. It's very experimental right now, and designing for it is an art form that we are only beginning to understand. We really don't quite know what we can do with this new medium. So these are some of the top level aspects of virtual reality. We have much to discover about it, but unlike traditional media, participants have all kinds of extra stuff that comes along with the VR experience. So your experiences are pretty vivid because you've got high resolution technology that gives you believable visuals and sounds that our perceptions accept as every bit as valid as reality. It is a complete sensory envelope around us. So we are emplaced or embodied within this virtual environment through our tracking devices and our avatars. We have a very unique separation from the physical world. Most media tries to do this, like sitting in a dark theater for a movie, but with VR, you are totally separated from the physical world. In fact, so much so that we're often walking into walls with headsets on. Another key aspect of immersive media is the agency and the interaction that we have there. So choices and involvement are part of the design. They're part of the medium. And that's something that's new for most of us in designing for a particular medium. Finally, we have emotional responses because the connections that we can make in a virtual environment, they create genuine feelings and emotional responses and things that we will remember if they've really connected with us. So how do you approach designing for this medium? Well, what I'm going to cover today is a little bit about my journey, my work, my philosophy, how I got to VR. We'll look at a couple of my VR projects because those are the things where I've developed some of these ideas about how you would design for this new medium. And we'll talk about some design guidelines that have derived from my work. It's not a very cohesive thing yet, but we're getting little glimmers every time we do something, every time we experience something, every time we talk about it. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers. So a little bit about my background. I'm going to collapse everybody's window here for a minute so I can see my slide. I've always, since I was a small child, been interested in both art and science. I thought I found a way to combine them in higher education by studying medical illustration. And I did do that for a while. But ultimately, I fell back into fine art because medical illustration was pretty confining for what I wanted to do. Fine art led me to experimental photography, where I was making my own emulsions in the darkroom and acting like a mad chemist in there, doing all kinds of interesting things, and then stuff like pasting and sewing onto the photographs. That led me, strangely enough, to computer graphics. And computer graphics studies led me to computer science because I wanted to know more about how these machines worked to be able to make images. With computer science, I also studied animation and eventually got into virtual reality. But always my art has been focused on emotional impact. And I wanted to do the same thing for computer science, which made my fellow computer science students and colleagues a little crazy because they were like, this is not about emotions. This is very, very cut and dried. You can see some of my early photographs here, and I think they pretty much say there's some emotional component there. Whoops. Okay, so from there, it was an easy kind of journey into virtual reality. Because I'd studied the 3D graphics or computer graphics and computer science, I started building 3D environments in some of the systems there. I was also doing some programming for animation and stuff. But I really found that building 3D environments was an amazingly expressive medium. So I could make them in 3D, but people couldn't see them in 3D. So I wanted to figure out ways for them to do that. So I would render two views of the world that I built and show them as stereo pairs in this kind of setup over here. So you can see I have little stereo viewers around a plinth that has a big light on it. And then I would make the two stereo slides, put them in the viewers, and then you could actually get a better sense of being inside and being immersed in these virtual worlds. So the best thing about it was that I was also building physical assemblages at the same time, but the computer graphics meant that I was not limited by what I could build physically. I could make all kinds of interesting things and light them and have them be very, very evocative. So about 1990, I found myself at the University of Central Florida in Orlando teaching both computer graphic art and animation. I also worked in a laboratory that was starting to do virtual reality research for the United States military. The military was interested in advancing this to figure out how to come up with better training mechanisms for soldiers so that they would be smarter when they had to go into these conflicts. So I worked on a number of military projects that I won't go into here. They were mostly very simple things about how we could see in VR, what we remembered in VR, whether it was a good training device. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to put emotions, like I'd done in my other artwork, into these virtual reality things. They were pretty boring back then. I mean, you could fly over a city, but you couldn't go in the buildings and there were no people, and it was just really kind of boring. So after hours at the Institute for Simulation and Training, I partnered with a person named Mike Goslin, and we both had the same goal to try and build emotionally evocative VR worlds. And together we built something called Virtopia, which was a series of virtual worlds that were designed to evoke emotional responses. Each world was designed to evoke a different emotional response. So, for example, this one was the conversation room. You would hear the walla walla of a crowd, but there were no people there. There was just this sort of strange animation on the wall. But if you went up to the wall or you looked at any of the photographs in this photo album, you would hear a bit of conversation that you could actually understand. So it was out of context. They were very kind of strange sentences, but it was very evocative to the people that experienced it, and they tended to spend a lot of time in this particular environment. We premiered Vertopia at the Florida Film Festival, and it was actually 93 and 94, but it was the first time VR had ever been shown at a film festival. And we did get emotional responses out of the participants that came to try Vertopia. One that they specifically felt emotionally challenged by was this 30-foot high spider that we had. So you imagine you're in the headset, all you're seeing is this red background and this spider web and this giant spider coming at you. Now the spider had 8 different states. It could ignore you, it could be interested in you, it could be chasing you, it could attack you. And we had each of those states tied to a heartbeat rhythm. So if the spider ignored you, it was a fairly slow heartbeat. But if he was coming after you, it was a very fast heartbeat. And using that, we engage the principle of entrainment, where you tend to sync up with the rhythm of something that you're hearing or you're immersed in. So people didn't like the spider. We even had people rip the headset off and kind of dart out of the room just to get away from the spider. But we knew we were onto something. Later, I was able to go help start a new research lab in Los Angeles called the Institute for Creative Technologies, part of USC. And while there, my job was to look at the ways that we could make immersive environments more believable, more cognitively real. So I did this test bed called the C Project for Sensory Environments Evaluation to see if we could bring new techniques into the VR design process to make them more emotionally evocative and feel more real. So what we first did was we asked ourselves, well, what do we have to work with? How do we make it so it feels real, even if it's not photoreal? And we're talking here, 2002, 3, 4. VR was not photoreal at that time. We did a lot of tricks to make it look pretty good, but it still, it was not photoreal by any means. But we wanted it to evoke these strong emotional responses, and we knew we had a perceptual palette of sight, sound, smell, touch, all kind of kinesthetic ideas, subliminal cues. We could use techniques like priming the participant before they go in. There was just this entire list of things that people had not been looking at to build virtual reality environments. And we developed this into a methodology after we built this DarkCon environment that was the beginning of what I think of as immersive design techniques. The DarkCon environment, because we were working for the military, we did something that looked kind of military like. It was a recon mission at night. Night because, you can get away with more in the dark. You were given a GPS device and you were supposed to go through this dark culvert and out the other side to see if an abandoned mill complex on the other side of the river was being inhabited by paramilitary forces or refugees. Now, there were enough clues in this culvert to say either one. There were photo albums and suitcases and baby dolls and cigarettes, but there were also bullet casings and blood on the walls, and you would hear the echoes of things that had happened in this culvert as you went through it. There were also clues and cues that evoked startle mechanisms, like if you went under the pipes in the top, you might disturb a colony of bats who would fly out and startle the heck out of you. We had rats in there. We had a lot of clues that would aim you to go in the right direction and do the things we wanted you to do. So, for example, when you got out at the end of the culvert along the river up here, you would look to one side and there was nothing there, and you'd look this side and there's a wrecked car here, this red wrecked car. Well, that was your only cover. So if you were going to surveil this building over here, that's where you wanted to be, because there were trucks and vehicles going over the bridge above you. There was all kinds of stuff going on. There were sentries on the roof, so you had to take cover. So these are some of the things that we put in into DarkCon, and then we tested it with a number of participants, and looked to see if we were getting the responses we wanted where we had designed them. We did that by putting physiological monitors on the participants and recording their heart rate variability and their skin conductance. And we found that we got exactly the responses we wanted where we designed them. And so we figured we had some pretty good techniques starting there. Now, we also looked at some of the things that we had to invent and add. We knew we were going to use fully spatialized sound, so 3D sound, and we had this system for 3D rendered sound that was a 10.2 system developed at the engineering school at USC. But we wanted to make it real time, not just rendered. They had built it so that you could see the difference when you were in a cathedral listening to music as opposed to a small room listening to music, that height information. We wanted to even get past that and go underneath you. So we built an infrasonic floor that we used to provide kind of an emotional score that you didn't hear at all, but you felt viscerally. So we put 10 subsonic transducers under this floor, and we were able to play them at not very high decibel levels, because that could be dangerous, but at low enough decibel levels that you weren't aware of them, but it made you uneasy. And so that helped us create an emotional score throughout the experience. This is just kind of a little diagram of what we thought our emotional score was. So where we had hot spots where like the rats came out or the bats flew, or it was calm because you were coming out the end of the culvert and it was a nice night, moon was coming up, so you weren't worried at that point. So we had places where we wanted you to feel anxious and places where we didn't. Now, we also wanted to add more senses. So scent was a big part of this. We at that point in time, you could put scent into VR, but it was done with these big systems that basically stunk up the room. And that did not make my fellow researchers at ICT very happy. So they said, we're not going to let you keep stinking up our VR theater here. So, cut it out. And I said, okay, well, we'll make something that doesn't stink up the VR theater. So we came up with this very localized way to give you smells, which we called the scent collar. And we went through several iterations of this because it used very small amounts of a scent, basically oil on a filter paper, and a tiny fan that was directed towards your nose. You got the whiff of the scent, but it did not go out into the room, and it didn't need big HVAC systems to clear it. So this became the way that we did scents in the DarkCon environment, and we got a patent for it in 2009, so I guess that's pretty expired by now. We've been continuing to evolve that scent collar, and this is a newer version, and we got to take it out of the stinky surveillance realm and bring it into the French pastry chef's kitchen, so you could pick up these little macaron cookies, and each had a different smell that you could smell when you brought the virtual cookie to your nose. So now what I want to do is look at some of the characteristics of VR as a new medium. What exactly is a VR experience? Well, it can be very open-ended. It's not something that's set in stone like a book or an authored film. It is, in its essence, a series of potential events where the participant has free will to go where they want, do what they want, and maybe interact with this thing, maybe not. Well, how do you make that into a cohesive experience for the participant? How do you organize the events or story beats or whatever you want to call them that are part of the experience into a meaningful structure where that participant understands the cause and the effects of their actions and the interactions with the environment? There are some key principles, sort of high-level principles of interaction, and these are affordances, signifiers, and responses. Okay, so what are these? Affordances are those things that give us clues as to what we can or should be doing. Affordances are basically all the possibilities for action or understanding between the objects, the users, the environment, and knowing what that object can do or how it can be used. Sometimes we need cues or clues to help us discover this, and these clues are called signifiers. They are the things that help you understand, either through experience or through discovery or figuring it out, what is available to you from that particular object. So for example, a door with a pull handle kind of says, I need to be opened by pulling on this handle. A door with a push plate says, I need to be opened by pushing the plate. And a door with a doorknob kind of says, you got to turn me to get me open. So another example of a signifier from games is often the objects that you're supposed to interact with glow in some way to get your attention so that you know, I want to open that magic box. And I know I can because it's glowing. So it signifies that you should interact with it in some way. And response is how your interaction affects you. How you know that you actually did something and that you probably did it correctly. You touched the glowing box and it flew open and all the magic came out. So more techniques for this cohesive experience we're trying to do in a place where the participant has free will. A couple of things that we came up with in the DarkCon explorations was this idea of corroborative detail. This is where there's marks of time or humanity on the environment. There's some temporal stuff that looks like it's either been there forever or you can tell it's just been dropped, or it's part of what makes that environment believable. We don't want a super squeaky clean environment. If we're walking down a city sidewalk, it's probably going to have some gunk on it, and a couple of tossed cigarettes, whatever. So these marks of time or humanity, and I had one film student call it clutter, the corroborative detail. He called it clutter because it's what made the environment rich and feel like it had been lived in. Another idea we came up with was this one of coercive narrative. And this is where you have detractors and deterrents to the participants' movements or gazes or actions in the environment. So again, a lot like affordances, the objects can have things that bring you to them or things that say, don't go here. And those can be very multisensory. So for example, in the culvert, we had one little offshoot and it smelled like rats and you probably didn't want to go down there. So we had a deterrent to the participant going down this little side thing. Every place we placed deterrents to a participant's movements in DarkCon, they did not go. And we even gave them, things to do if they did go where they weren't supposed to go. But of over 300 participants that we had go through that, only one went somewhere they weren't supposed to go. So we figured we had done the attractors to get them to go places and the deterrents to stop them from going places very well to get that kind of data back, that only one person didn't pay attention. So these things help us guide or predict where the participant's going to go, what they're going to do, and what they are going to get out of your experience ultimately. So I did write up a PhD based on all of this stuff. You can get that by going to my website at morie.org and download it. Again, it was very early. We've gone through a lot more discovery process since then. All right, now I want to talk about another project of mine. This was one called Ansible. We were thinking that we were going to build a holodeck for space travel. Okay, so that's the Ansible project, which stands for a network of, oh, I'm never going to remember this. We had a great network. All I remember is bilateral engagement at the end there. This was a call that NASA put out, their human research program, their behavioral health and performance section of that. We had spent a couple of years working with them, looking at what the problems might be for astronauts in the future who would go on long duration space flights. And they were everything from, losing bone mass to not liking the food to all kinds of things. Well, one of the things we realized is that there were two big problems psychologically for these astronauts, these future astronauts, and that was sensory deprivation, being locked up in a tin can going to Mars, and social isolation. So you might be with the same three people for, years. So that's what we addressed in the Ansible project. We wrote up a proposal, they accepted it, we spent a couple of years working on it. And what we did was we built a series of virtual reality environments for these future astronauts to keep them a little saner, a little less lonely, a little less homesick while they were traveling. We did this with a company called SIFT, Smart Information Flow Technologies, my company, All These Worlds. So how did we deliver this? Well, we built all these virtual reality environments. We put it in a high seas Mars analog location in Hawaii called the High Seas. It's this Quonset hut. You can see it from above there. It's got a solar panel for some electricity. They were totally contained in this environment, and all communication was delayed 22 minutes each way, as if this team was on Mars. We got 6 volunteer scientists, not astronauts, but 6 volunteer scientists to go in and lock themselves in this place for a year with only each other and all time delayed communication, no synchronous communication at all. This is what it looked like inside. This is the desk with the setup for the VR thing. We ran a server in this environment, and we had another one in California. So the scientists could interact with the virtual reality environments on like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And they could get in and change things and do things and leave messages for each other and for their family and friends back home. Those people could get in on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And then every morning at about 3 a.m. Hawaii time, we would synchronize the server in California that the friends and family were using with the one that the scientists in Hawaii were using. So when they got up the next day, they could see what their friends and family or their loved ones had left for them. We did this so early that we put it in with a DK2. There was no commercial headset at the time. We put it in with the Oculus Developer Kit. And of course, the commercial version came out during that year, but we couldn't go into the isolation analog to upgrade it. So this is what the scientists got to use. I'm going to show you a little video of Ansible. So this describes some of the extent of what we did. We did 37 regions, and we tried to do things that would help them with their psychological health. There's the anagram. Yeah.
The Ansible project demonstrates a prototype virtual world that astronauts on long-duration spaceflight missions can use as a psychological home away from home. Ansible provides activities that serve as ways to escape the confines of the spacecraft, explore new forms of interaction, and stay in intimate contact with family and friends back on Earth. The communication delays native to long-duration space missions make traditional connections such as real-time video conferencing impossible. Email and other asynchronous communications remain available, but adding a rich three-dimensional environment gives astronauts the opportunity to spend some time in the same space as their loved ones while on their voyage, even if not at the same time. The keystone of the Ansible virtual world is called the FAMCOM, or Family Communication Center. At the center of the FAMCOM is a large hall showcasing the phases of the moon, with its current phase back on Earth indicated by a gentle glow. Above the moon is a model of the sun and terrestrial planets, showing the trajectory of the astronaut spacecraft on its way toward Mars. The red line indicates their progress along the journey. There are several activity rooms within the FAMCOM, all designed to reinforce a connection to home and Earth. The library is a space for relaxing, playing the virtual piano, or an ongoing game of chess with a family member. Or one can visit the art gallery, with its regularly changing exhibits of artwork. The club is where the astronauts can sit amongst other avatars. These are programmed AI agents that can engage in small talk and act as an interactive audience for stand-up comics or video shows. They can also fill the dance floor when the club turns into a disco. In the post office, astronauts can pick up a 3D file from home for printing on board, or they can play a specially created two-player game with a family member back on Earth, which has been designed to elicit positive shared memories. The Earthlinks room provides the latest in Earthside weather, recent snapshots via Google Maps, a skylight linked to changing weather patterns, and a recent video of an Earth-based weather event. An astronaut doesn't have to stay in the FAMCOM. There are other interesting places within the expanse of the virtual world. For example, they can choose an interesting vacation from a range of virtual destinations in the vacation room, take part in a historical recreation, dive a coral reef, or enjoy a quiet evening in a small town on a front porch at sunset. All are possible. Through one door of the FAMCOM is the amphitheater, where presentations from Earth can be uploaded to the video screens and enjoyed on demand. Another door leads to nature walks, virtual campsites, and serene rocky shores. The last door leads to the meditation center, where classes in mindfulness can be accessed via recorded sessions. There is beautiful landscaping and a Zen garden for strolling. Also within the FAMCOM, astronauts are able to access private areas in the Ansible world designed for family interactions, which can be reached by clicking on one of the signs to teleport to a private region. Crew and family can design these areas to resemble their own homes, or one of imagination. This space is an example, with a living room, kitchen, dining, and family rooms, as well as a garden area. All of the items, as well as the rooms themselves, can be selected from one of the 3 available malls that are stocked with a variety of merchandise. Special events, such as a shared virtual Thanksgiving dinner, can be held in the private home spaces. While a real-time dinner is not actually possible, a metaphorical dinner can be held asynchronously, with each family member visiting the space and leaving a note about what they are thankful for that others can enjoy later. This type of activity can help reinforce the emotional ties between family members even while they are separated for many months. We have based the offerings within Ansible on scientific research that indicates the psychological value these forms of activities have for people. We believe they will also serve in their virtual form to enhance the astronauts' experience on long-duration space voyages, allowing them to remain better connected to their loved ones, expand their perceived space through the expanse of the virtual world, and provide them enjoyable activities for their discretionary time. Our next phase of work will utilize the virtual world space as part of a NASA analog mission to see if the activities we have planned can surmount the communication delays while providing social and family connections that are meaningful and psychologically beneficial.
Fairly small team, actually. But we had a lot of advice from NASA and from experts there on what astronauts really needed. So we looked at that as a start of building a tool that all astronauts that would take these long missions in the future could benefit from. But we also believed that it could benefit anyone who feels isolated or alone. And we are seeing that that is one of the good uses of virtual reality. What are some of the benefits of the VR medium? Well, you're free to try a lot of things in VR that you might not try in the real world. Things that would be dangerous or have different physics or are based on pure imagination, and you have to figure out that new world. So a couple of examples are one game called Richie's Plank, which is just you seeing if you can step out on something that seems to be really high up and dangerous above the ground, or rock climbing. This is one where it's safe to fall because you're going to fall and it's not going to kill you in the virtual world. This was actually one of the very first benefits that VR was noted for, that you could do things that would be dangerous in the real world and not have those things have the disastrous effects they might have in the real world. So, for example, flight simulators. Almost every pilot has to perform a number of training hours in these massive flight simulators that simulate all the aspects of a plane and can have all of these things programmed in to be, bird strikes and lightning strikes and loss of some essential function. So you wouldn't want to fly a plane that didn't have a pilot that had gone through these things and survived them successfully in the virtual space, so they know how to do them in the physical space. So that's one. Another one is really interesting about virtual reality is that you're in VR with no distractions. If you've got one of these headsets on, you are separated from the physical world. And this is a luxury that VR provides. And it's why it becomes so useful for meditation experiences, because it helps you focus on what's there in front of your sensory mechanisms. You aren't as bothered by the barking dog or the crash in the kitchen that's happening because you can't hear them. Another one is that in VR, you can be very, very social. So when you get in VR with other people, it makes it somehow even more real. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter if you're a robot. It doesn't matter if you're a dog. It doesn't matter what you are, as long as you are with other people and you can communicate with them and share adventures. And this is true even if it's an AI agent or a performance someone who's performing in that virtual world. So in the Down Under performance piece, this character is actually narrating and talking to you and kind of telling you what's there and what you can do. Some of these now are becoming AI agents, so that you can have that social thing even if there's not another person there, because there's an AI programmed to interact and interface with you. Another one is that VR really, really affects us. What happens to us in this virtual space causes real psychological and physiological effects. Our body, ourselves, our mind, our hearts, they're all affected by what we are experiencing, because it's coming into us as if it was reality, into our sensory mechanisms. And we are embodied in this experience. It's a lived experience. Our bodies are tracked. We are making decisions. And so the effects that happen in a virtual reality experience are very real. And this is something a designer needs to keep at the front of their mind, that this is not just, it's not just a comic book that you're going to read once. This is something that can have really long-lasting effects on the participant. Now I will talk a little bit about genres, and there's not enough time to go into all the genres of the VR medium because we don't even know what they are yet. I'll talk about one that it gets mentioned a lot, which is narrative VR. Now, you have a traditional narrative, which is an authored story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's always told the same. It's going to be the same story every time you come at it, with the same beginning, middle, and end. With VR, you don't have to have a linear story. you can have a story that is created by your choices within the space. This allows your imagination to be part of the creative process. Now, how do you design for that? That's something we still are figuring out. But that makes the story more yours. So I have 3 examples here of more traditional narrative stories in the virtual space. One is Henry. Well, Henry is a cute little porcupine over here on the lower left. And he has a birthday party. He pops all his balloons. He doesn't have any friends because they don't like his porcupine quills. But, it's a cute story. Does it need to be in VR? What is the immersive component of the story that compels it to be in VR? Well, I would argue not too much. Now, what's interesting is it was a group of animators, very seasoned animators, who came in and made this story in VR. So it's in a world that wraps around you, but you're not really using that immersive space as any aspect of the story. You get the same story if you watched it as an animation. There are some where they try to bring your attention to different parts of the virtual world. So up here we have a little bit from Gloomy Eyes, a scene from Gloomy Eyes. Gloomy Eyes has little diorama kinds of scenes, and one will fade out as another one over to your right comes up. And so you have to turn around and watch the story unfold still in a linear fashion because you don't have the choice of what's coming next. But it's an interesting way of bringing your attention to what the next scene's going to be. And then you have something like Dear Angelica down here in the lower right, which is, first of all, the illustrations are totally made in VR with something like OpenBrush or I forgot the name of the thing, OpenBrush, or it's funny how words go. Yeah, Tilt Brush. It's funny how the words go away when you're thinking about something totally different. And this, because the visuals are kind of integrated, being built in VR, and they go around you. This is a linear story, but these images sort of wrap around you like you might want the pages of a book to do, but you can't. So in this one, it does. Now, again, these are all traditional narratives. These are not the ones where you make the choices that change the story, that allow you to contribute to the story. So this is just one example of a genre in VR that can be the same as its traditional form, but has so much potential to be more. So VR is really best. How do you know when it's good? Well, it's best when it transcends the subject matter. And when it becomes a unique experience for you, a unique and personal experience that is meaningful or memorable, partly because you had agency and action in that experience. Also, I'll add, it's kind of good if you want to tell people about it afterwards. If you're like, oh man, I just had this VR experience and it was so bizarre, or it made me cry. And we especially know if it's good if you want to make a return visit. That's always the best criteria. So in summary, VR, I see it as its own medium. It's a developing medium. We don't know quite what to do for it or how to design for it. Going back as far as the 1980s through to today, it's experiential above all else. It separates us from the physical world. It places us in a cognitively real world. And sometimes this is called presence. We feel like we're there because we believe the world is there. True VR includes agency, where people can make these choices of what they do in the VR experience. And so I'll leave you with a few thoughts for designing VR experiences. How do we build these kinds of things that are unique for each person, where that participant is the one that completes the design of the work? We got to be designers that allow other people to complete the work. The participant inhabits that space viscerally with their body, with their mind, with their all of them, and can gain a personal connection to that experience, making that space into a place and leaving with meaningful memories or things that have affected them. Just going to say, I have this particular VR piece in VR chat. If you want to go look for it, it's a kind of a nostalgic little piece of early VR or early computer graphics artwork I did in the house that I did it in back in the 1980s. And that's my only existing VR that you can try right now. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope we can take some questions now. And like I said, if you go to morie.org, there's some more of my work there and also the PhD dissertation, which can be downloaded. Okay, so we got time for questions. Hi, guys. You're back. So, Laura, you want to be the one to see if anybody's got questions or read the chat?
Yes, if anyone wants to paste in the chat, or if you want to just speak up and ask a question, that would be great.
I have a question. Jackie, do you think that there is a world where, in terms of participants interacting with the environment, is there like an AI LLM world where the VR experience has access to like a chat GPT sort of LLM where it can actually change the person's experience, or they can ask it questions, or they can I don't
Not,
know.
not yet that I know of. Be a good thing. I'm sure people are working on it. I mean, I want a VR that remembers me. You know, that's the thing. Oh, hi, Jackie. I see you're back. Well, we've already done that part of this world, so I got something new for you today. So, as far as I know, there isn't much like that unless you have live performers. And if you have live performers, you know, they're much better than any LLM.
There was an episode of The Daily where they talked about this woman who got into ChatGPT and made up a boyfriend. And it only remembered her though for 30 days. So every 30 days it basically broke up with her because it didn't remember everything that she taught it. So I was just thinking like if you can create a world where it remembered you and you had a sort of relationship with the world, whatever world it was, you know. Anyway.
Yeah, I think right now the only way we do that is when it's social and there are other people involved. But, you know, who knows? We'll see. The sentient house, maybe like a sentient building. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. I was curious how you test for emotional impact of an experience. If you're working on, making something that impacts people deeply, kind of what things do you look for? What kinds of questions do you ask people afterwards?
Yeah, so I think you can do a couple things. You can embed it into the experience itself. So like in Trip, they have a thing at the beginning that asks you how you're doing, and then at the end it asks you, after you've gone through the whole meditative thing, it asks you how you're doing. So you can, there's an embedded data point there that they can look at. How long they're in there is another one. You can go the point where you put in these physiological monitors, and I think those are getting a little easier to use with an emotional, with the virtual experience. They were a real pain in the mid 2000s and very expensive. But that way you can actually see if there's a reaction where you've designed it a reaction to be. And there are headsets now that have the EEG modules on them, so you could do that. It's a lot of overhead. It's the other thing you can do is watch the participant and see what they're seeing on another screen and go, oh look, they didn't like the bats flying at their hair. So that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is another thing where we need new techniques for this. We need ways to make it both intuitive and transparent. So, if you can come up with some new ways to do that, I think that would be a great addition.
Okay.
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 Hi, Jackie. Oh, sorry. Did you have a follow-up,
No,
Hannah?
that's okay. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay. So, first of all, nice to put, for me to put my name to, or sorry, I don't know, face to my name. I don't know. Um, you have been in educational institutions, you have worked with the government, you have worked with lots of different types of technology. This year, AWE's whole tagline is XR is going mainstream. I'm curious if you feel like there are any particular trends that might make you like optimistic towards a state where VR and AR are more mainstream, just based on, the trends that you've seen over the course of your career.
I think it's being used in certain places with some regularity that we don't really know about, like especially for phobia therapy, for um, pain distraction, for training. These are things that don't necessarily make the headlines, but VR is a standard for some of these. Certainly, traumatic stress, post-traumatic stress stuff uh, is in 60 VA hospitals now. So those are the things that a little under the radar. I've done a number of training things for crazy dangerous equipment. Who wants to talk about that? How to fix a windmill turbine? But those are beneficial things, and I think there are more things that in the psychological realm that there could be a lot more benefit to using VR in, and we just haven't gotten there. So a lot of this is still in research labs. But I think the fact that we know so much about how it affects us means two things. Let's do more stuff that affects us for the good, and let's be careful that we're not affecting us in negative ways.
Thank you for that quick follow-up. Do you feel the same way, or do you see that as being really how XR is going to go mainstream, or is there also something on the consumer side, or the more independent, um, just just consumer side, I guess, as opposed to institutional side?
I, for me, the mark of success would be if this is a medium that we go to often for different reasons. And I think there's not enough art in the medium yet. And I would go for more art. I have been now for 2 weeks trying to put myself in every VR I could possibly put myself in. And I would say of the 50 I've done, maybe two are memorable. And, come on, we could do better than that. I want this to be I'm so excited to go in that new thing. And um, the ones I'm finding that are very interesting are the live performance ones, because you've got a lot of depth there. You've got some variability in the fact that the live performers have agency to do what they want to do. So I think that's one to watch. But I want to see more, things like Notes on Blindness, or, I would like to be in something like What Dreams May Come, where you're taking journeys into dangerous or beautiful or both environments. So I think as an art form, it's not accessible enough to people. There's still a lot of pain points, but I think it has the potential to be such a rich medium that I'm still hoping. I'm still out there punting for it. So we have a question in the chat. How did the crew at High Seas respond to Ansible, and were there any unexpected outcomes from the study? Well, we knew a lot about locking people up for a year through journals from the Antarctic and other very long isolation missions. We knew that there was a third quarter slump where they all tried to kill each other. So that happened with our group. They didn't try and kill each other, but they were slamming doors in their rooms, I think. Now, not that we were there to know this, but we had a way to measure physiological stuff and certain daily questionnaires for these guys. And we had the same thing with a mission before that didn't have the virtual reality Ansible stuff. So we had a nice control group. And this group did less of the words that indicated they were homesick. And they did less of the the lonely stuff. So all of these things that we were trying to measure, that stuff, they came out better for. Now, this was the first mission that had been a full year locked up in that thing, and so they did have a few more issues. Our biggest issue was, it was not, nobody knew what VR was. So these people did not have that experience. And so a couple of them didn't like it. And a couple of them loved it. And one of them built all kinds of crazy, he built his own home up in the air with crazy stuff that was going on all the time. And then he did this 10-minute video of the tour of his house up there. We gave them a way to record their avatars doing something, singing happy birthday or doing a tour of something. And then you would leave this little Tron-like disc. And so when people came in the next day, they would go, oh, there's a message. And it could be private, or it could be for everybody. And it could be singing happy birthday, to someone. So, but people used it in interesting ways, like this one guy who did the whole tour of his house. And then we had another one of the scientists do a tour of the virtual habitat that we built that mirrored the habitat. So some of them used it, and all three of them could be in at the same time. So they did some of that. I saw them having picnics together and stuff. But we were not supposed to be too observant, so we did mostly just the data we collected.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I just a follow-up to that. I know you said you weren't meant to be doing this sort of observation on that level necessarily, but did you see any gender differences in the way that the technology was used? And also, I'm just wondering about where you foresee like the intersection with gaming and AI shaping future development for these kinds of experiences.
We can learn a lot from games. I think the game design has got a lot of this affordance signifier reaction stuff down. So and so many different industries have that. So theme park design, theater, certainly immersive theater. So that with AI, AI gives us another level of stuff where we can bring in intelligent beings. They don't even have to be human, but intelligent beings to add to the story. So, think of Velveteen Rabbit that talks to you. So we haven't done enough in that yet, but of course I think AI is not quite there. We did some stuff at the Institute for Creative Technologies in AI before AI became this big, and it was hard. You had to program and code and write scripts for everything that was said. But today it's easier, and maybe making it easier has made it less, less intriguing to implement. But I think we need some good design stuff for that. I would love to work on a team that's designing stuff that has intelligent stuff in the world that challenges us, that enriches us, that makes things even more interesting. I can think of one that's coming out of the class that has an intelligent building that could be really a star in that particular experience. So more, please.
Thank you so much.
Okay, maybe one last question and then we can wrap. And if you don't have one, I'd just like to see a show of hands. How many people are building virtual reality stuff? Building or designing? Okay, good, because we need more variety and ideas. And that's the best thing about where we are today, is that we finally have this out where ordinary people can get hold of it. When I did it, man, I had to write a 40-page proposal to get $10,000 to buy the headset that cost $7,000. And it was a lot more overhead. And today, there's just so much out there that we should have a lot of variety and a lot of ideas and a lot of really enriching experiences. So if you're doing anything, let me know. Let me know. I want to see what people are doing. Okay, over to you, Lauren.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your joining us today for this wonderful talk. And well, I'll be back probably in late July, early August for the next session. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone there.
Thanks for the opportunity, Lauren, and thank you all for attending.
And thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.
so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.